Hey everybody. Today for our discussion, we're going to be talking about why memory management matters whenever designing an operating system. So, the first thing that I would want to talk about is remote code execution. In the event that you do not design your system to handle memory correctly and the write and read of that memory, then you can end up with remote code execution. So what happens? Well, an application will regularly allocate some number of chunks of memory for storing data, and all of these chunks are typically fixed size. They'll mete out a certain amount of RAM, and then they store data like your user provided inputs and things like that directly into that area. But if that allocation is performed incorrectly, then an attacker may be able to create an input or otherwise send packets to that system, and then they can write outside of the allocated buffer. And if they do that, that's called an out of bounds write. And as soon as they are able to accomplish then they may be able to execute code that they have sent to the system and then overwritten parts of memory in order to be able to run other applications or execute an attack or so on and so forth. So an extremely famous version of this happening was Eternal Blue. So within the Eternal Blue exploit, there was an SMB version 1 vulnerability that whenever you sent the system certain packets, you could start writing to the memory, and then at some point the computer would be able to read certain information, and then you could start executing code. You could execute ransomware, malware, just a host of different things to be able to infiltrate the system, all via being able to feed that information to the computer via these very, very specially crafted little packets that the system just ate up because it didn't know what to do with the data that it was receiving. So memory management is incredibly important. An example of failed memory management would be the Eternal Blue exploit. And in addition to that, whenever you take a look at systems like Unix or Linux or so on and so forth, one of the most important things you can do is make sure that you protect your system from somebody being able to communicate with it via a tool like a firewall, right? Know how people can communicate with your system, lock it down so they can only communicate the proper channels, and then in addition to that, if they don't need to be able to communicate it with it, then block them from doing so. Because if somebody can figure out how to craft the correct packet and send it to an application that is waiting for communication off of that system, potentially they can exploit that to cause a remote code execution. So with that said, taking care of your computer, making sure that you pay attention to what data is going in and out of it, being cautious by installing things like a firewall or otherwise making sure that you use proper endpoint security. All of those things combined can help protect you from vulnerabilities and exploits that take advantage of improper memory configuration. But again, once somebody has access to the computer via SSH or so on and so forth, it becomes increasingly harder and harder to do that if the user is theoretically in a place where they should be and they are using the computer in a way that technically they ought to be able to use it for, then it becomes much harder. So one of the other ways to defeat remote code execution or otherwise to protect these applications is make sure that you are updating your applications. Update your operating system, update your applications, take care of the system regularly. This will help you. Can you think of another memory management related vulnerability that could potentially affect an operating system? If you can, tell us about it. Talk to us about it. Tell us what that vulnerability could be, what could happen, what it targets, and if you are really feeling motivated, this might be a good time for you to go out and see if you can't find a CVE. Take a look and see what are some of the tools that are out there to help you figure out what applications could potentially be vulnerable to remote code execution via memory or buffer overwrite. And what I would do to give you a hint before I shut this down is take a look at web browsers. Firefox, Chrome, Chromium. Take a look at some of the CVEs that are related to those to help you better understand some of the things that can be done whenever you figure out how to overwrite or escape some of the bounds that are set on an operating system or set on applications by the operating system related to memory management. And with that said, just one more thing for you to noodle on during your day, and I will talk to you all later.